Everyone, thanks for joining us in our study of um, the attributes of God. I'm Tim, retired pastor and your guide on our study. And today we're beginning um, the study of a huge topic. The attribute of God we're considering is His holiness. You know, in 2 Samuel chapter 6, you read the story of how the Ark of the Covenant, which had been captured by the Philistines, was now back in the land of Israel, had been for some time. And David was planning to move it into the city. He assembled 30,000 people. He brought the orchestra, he brought the choir. And you can picture the scene as they took the Ark of the Covenant, that precious artifact. They very carefully placed it on a cart, just like the Philistines had done when it came to Israel originally. The music began and the people were cheering. And then in 2 Samuel 6, verses 6 and 7, it says, when they came to Nahon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it. The oxen shook it, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. That must have been shocking to David and everyone who was there to see it happen. It's kind of shocking to read about it, isn't it? This man was not in rebellion against God in any way. In fact, he was trying to help God out, I think, by stabilizing the Ark of the Covenant while it was on this cart so it wouldn't fall off into the mud. So why was God so angry? Well, it's because the Ark of the Covenant pictured the presence of God. It was intended to be in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. And the Ark itself was holy and illustrated God's holiness. And just that illustration, just that picture of God's holiness was so sacred that to touch it meant death. The prophet Isaiah, in another story, had the rare privilege of seeing the Lord on his throne in Isaiah chapter 6, and his reaction is recorded in Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 5. He didn't rush up to the throne and say, God, it's so good to be here. I've got some questions I want to ask. No, the prophet said, woe is me, for I'm undone, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. Mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. There was the Lord on his throne, and there were the angels continually, day and night, crying out, holy, holy, holy. Yet Isaiah knew he was not holy. If there's one attribute of God that should terrify us, it's this one, that God is holy. And it's important enough that it's going to take me more than just one session to teach this. And so let's do this. Let's not rush through it, but let's take our time and think about this. And to start with, before we go any further, we need to define what we mean when we talk about the holiness of God. Now, among Christians, the word holy is sometimes used as a synonym for moral excellence or perfection or righteousness. That certainly applies to God, but there's a more basic meaning to the word that leads us uh, to those meanings. The primary meaning is to be separate or different from anything else. It means that God is higher, superior, beyond anything else that's in this universe. It's often used as an adjective in the Bible. Holy Spirit, holy ground, holy people. And it could refer to a special place that's just away from everything else. Have you ever had a place like that where you use that particular place just to get away from the activities and people that would normally surround you? I have. I had a place like that that was just for me and God and no one else. I had my Bible there, and I would pray, and I would just seek God's face, but it was just for the two of us. It was separate. And in that sense, I guess it would meet the definition of holy in the Bible, a holy place. Something is holy when it has God's touch upon it. And at that point, it becomes separate from all the rest of the world. I think communion is one example. When I was in college, there were some students who were having communion in their dorm room with Fritos and Coke, and just very, very spiritual, I guess, about what they were doing, their devotion to the Lord. Any problem with that? Probably a lot of people would say, no, no problem there. They're just kids. They're trying to, do something to honor God and remember Him. Well, I think there is a problem. And it's just they profaned something that God meant to be kept separate and holy. And why would I say that? Simply because Jesus never consecrated Fritos and Coke. He used bread and grape juice. He gave it as an ordinance for the church. Now, there's nothing inherently holy about the elements of bread and grape juice until Jesus made it holy in that particular way. It's also why, when I was a military chaplain, I never led our troops in communion. Now, other chaplains did, most of them did. As far as I know, maybe they all did, but I chose not to because it's an ordinance given to the church, and the Army is not a church. I know there are things that we do that are similar to what takes place in a church. We have our meetings and preaching and teaching, and we're praising God and we're singing. There's music a part of it. We're praying, seeing people saved in our services. Those are all things that go on in a church, but that doesn't make it a church in the way that God defines the term in the New Testament. The Army's not a church. And so that's why I chose not to do that. And maybe you can't understand why in the world that would make sense, but it does to me. God's holiness means that He's separated from the sin of this world. He expects His people also to reflect His holiness in their own lives. He expects us to be separated. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 2 said, "Speak unto the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." There's an example of this in the rebellion of Korah. In Numbers chapter 16 is where you find that story. Now, Korah took men, and they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing that all of the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. I can just picture this group saying, yeah, we're all God's people. Who do you think you are? Well, the response of Moses was in verse 5. He said, Unto Korah and unto all his company, even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him, even him whom he hath chosen, will he cause to come near unto him. This do, take ye censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth choose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. And Numbers chapter 16 tells how other Israelites who were following in this rebellion against Moses died there in the desert. The ground opened up, and they went alive into the pit and closed up over them. But the next day it happened, just as Moses said in verse 35. These 250 men wanted to do the job as priests. They arrived there at the tabernacle. Verse 35 says, There came out a fire from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, that ye take up the censers out of the burning, and scatter thou the fire yonder, for they are hallowed. The censers of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar, for they offer them before the Lord, and therefore they are hallowed. They shall be a sign unto the children of Israel. So even though these 250 men were rebels against Moses and God, and even though they died by fire in God's judgment, again, in this dramatic way, there was the question, what do we do with all these censers now? Do we throw them away? Do we sell them and make some money? No. And the reason is because once they're dedicated to God, they become holy, and they could not be used for anything else. And so that's why they were made into a covering for the altar. It would stay there in the sanctuary place. And the same is true for you and me, my friends. We're God's people. God considers us to be holy. We're to be separate in the same way. And once we dedicate ourselves unto God, we're never again people of this world. We're His. Well, think about that today. We'll continue our thoughts in our study and what it means to be holy and that God is holy in days to come. Have a great day, folks. See you again very soon.